My Jewish name is actually Hadassah, which means myrtle, but I believe you may have heard of me under my Persian name, Esther, which actually means star. By God's amazing grace, I was allowed to rise to the position of Queen of the Persian Empire when I married my husband, King Xerxes. You see, I am a descendant of the Jewish exiles that were taken from the land of Judah by King Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon. My parents died early in my life, and I was raised by my cousin Mordecai. Mordecai's great-great-grandfather Kish, who was a Benjamite, was taken in the second deportation of exiles, along with the prophet Ezekiel, his wife Eliana, and many others, and were settled in the country of Babylon, along the Kibar River. After that time, many things happened to my family and my people, Israel. 70 years passed from the first deportation of the Jewish exiles to Babylon, which included Daniel and his 3 friends, until the Persian Emperor Cyrus invaded Babylon in 538 BC and took the city by night without a fight. Daniel was still there in the palace, now 83 years old, waiting for his moment. Jeremiah had predicted it would be 70 years of captivity, and the time was nearly up. This is where we pick up our narrative of the exciting life of Daniel, one most beloved of God. I am so excited to tell you all what happened. Daniel greeted the new conqueror and presented King Cyrus with a scroll of Isaiah 45, written 150 years earlier. This scroll named Cyrus as the king who would allow the people of Yahweh to return to Jerusalem and rebuild the temple. Cyrus, the king of the newly united Medo-Persian Empire, was very moved by the words of God. In that same year, King Cyrus, stirred by the Spirit of Yahweh, sent out a proclamation. The Jews were going home, just as Jeremiah had written, and they were to rebuild the temple. Under the direction of Joshua, the high priest, and Zerubbabel, the Jewish governor, approximately 50,000 of God's people chose to return to their homeland with the full blessing of the emperor, along with the original gold and silver articles from the temple. I can imagine what a sight that was. You may ask, why didn't Daniel return with the exiles to Jerusalem? It is not recorded in history, so no one really knows for sure. Was it because of his age, or God's desire to continue to utilize him in a power position in the Persian government? After all, he had 66 years of experience serving the king of Babylon. Whatever the reason, Daniel was not among the returning exiles. Miraculously, he was chosen to serve as a leading official in the Persian Empire as a man of high status and influence. At this point in time, a man named Darius, a Mede, was set up as king of Babylon by the Persian Emperor Cyrus. Cyrus had purposely married the daughter of the Median king to unite the two peoples. Placing a Mede in charge of this portion of his realm was a politically correct thing to do. By the way, who are the Medes in 2021? Yes, they still exist. In your day, they are called the Kurds, and the Persians are the modern-day Iranians. Because the Persian Empire was very expansive at this time, the former Babylonian Empire was divided into provinces and ruled by 120 princes. Daniel was named as one of 3 governors who were the overseers of these princes. In fact, he was named the most preferred one. What a miracle! Daniel, who had slipped into obscurity under the reign of Belshazzar of Babylon, was now in a high-ranking position in the Medo-Persian Empire. The reason? He had an excellent spirit in him. As often happens when an extremely competent servant of Yahweh works under the Lord's anointing, the other governors and princes around him became jealous and envious of Daniel. This happened in my day, and it happens in yours too. Are there not, even now, people in your culture who are jealous of what you have or can do? They can see the love of Christ operating in you, yet they don't know how to deal with it. They wish to take you out and lift themselves up. These envious men who despised Daniel were both of Chaldean and Persian descent, and they resented the influence and power this exile of Judah held over them. Secretly, they concocted a plot to bring down Daniel. They knew they had to remove the source of Daniel's strength, prayer. Isn't this often where the enemy tries to take us out? These men went to the king with a lie, one that would feed his ego, and undermine Daniel at the same time. The princes proposed, "All of us are in agreement about this wonderful idea. We desire to make a royal statute and make a decree that whoever shall pray to any god or man for 30 days, except you, O king, shall be cast into the den of lions." Foolishly taken in by their scheming, Darius signed the decree. In the Persian Empire, decrees were not allowed to be altered or canceled. They were law, and even the king himself could not change it. I believe if I would have been Daniel, I might have been tempted to pray in private at this point, instead of in front of an open window facing east toward Jerusalem, as was his custom according to the Torah. Daniel always prayed to Yahweh this way, 3 times a day, and the princes knew it. Daniel was immovable. He continued to pray as he had done before. What a challenge! He must have known this plot was created to destroy him. Yet he prayed on and walked right into the battle. At the first opportunity, Daniel was spied praying by the princes, and of course they immediately tattled to the king. Darius, who loved Daniel, was determined to deliver him, but nothing could be done. He blamed himself for being tricked, but it was too late. As the king prepared to cast Daniel into the lion's den, he encouraged him. "Thy God, whom thou servest continually, he will deliver you." How we would all love our faith to shine as brightly as Daniel's did to the people around us. Oh, that they would see us serving God continually through our lives and every day. King Darius himself proclaimed faith in Daniel's God. He believed God was going to deliver Daniel. After the king sealed the tomb, he went home and fasted, not being able to sleep all night. In the early morning, as the king rushed to the tomb, he called to Daniel, "O Daniel, servant of the living God, is your God able to deliver you from the lions?" Amazingly, Daniel answered him from the lion's den. "O king, live forever! My God sent his angel and shut the lions' mouths, so that they have not hurt me, because I was found innocent before him. I have done no wrong before you." The king could hardly contain his joy as Daniel was taken out of the den. Then he commanded that Daniel's accusers and their families were to be thrown into the den instead. This time they were immediately destroyed by the lions. Darius, amazed at the miracle, sent out a decree to the entire realm, extolling the living God and testifying that Yahweh had saved Daniel from the lions. After this, Daniel prospered under the reign of Darius the Mede and King Cyrus, the Persian Emperor. Many Christians believe that chapter 9 of Daniel's book, written in the first year of King Darius, is one of the most exciting chapters of the entire Bible. As I mentioned earlier, in the first year of the Persian takeover of Babylon, the Jewish people were released from slavery and allowed to return home to Jerusalem to rebuild Yahweh's temple. It had been 70 years. The servitude of the nation, as it was called, was the time from the very first deportation of exiles from Jerusalem to the return of the captives to rebuild the temple. It was 70 years to the day, just as Jeremiah had said. What an exciting time. However, as Daniel searched the scrolls of Jeremiah, he realized that there seemed to be 2 70-year periods of time predicted by Jeremiah. Daniel was seeking to understand. The second period, called the desolations of Jerusalem, would be from the time of the actual destruction of the city to the rebuilding of the city itself. Daniel went to his knees and cried out to the Lord for his people. He fasted, wore sackcloth, and covered his head with ashes. He confessed the many sins of the people of Israel and asked God to turn his fury away from Jerusalem. He acknowledged that our people had sinned and done wickedly and rebelled. We had refused to listen to the prophets. We had disobeyed God and did not walk in his laws. We had brought upon ourselves the curses written in Deuteronomy 28:15-68. Finally, we had not been sorry and had not prayed a prayer of confession. As Daniel prayed, he interceded for the sin of the entire nation. "O Lord, hear. O Lord, forgive. O Lord, listen and act. Do not delay for your own sake, my God, for your city and your people are called by your name." As he was praying, the angel man, Gabriel, appeared again telling Daniel that he had been sent to bring him a new vision and also the ability to understand it. When he spoke to Daniel, he addressed him as greatly beloved. You will want to read it in Daniel chapter 9. Throughout Scripture, the angel Gabriel is sent to bring news of Messiah, Yeshua. What news of Jesus did he bring? Here's what Gabriel told Daniel. There were 70 weeks of years, or 490 years, that were a set number of years in which much would happen to the nation of Israel and Jerusalem. What were these things? To finish the transgression, to make an end of sins, to make reconciliation for iniquity, to bring in everlasting righteousness, to seal up vision and prophecy, and to anoint the most holy. Upon close examination, we know these things were all to be accomplished by Messiah. This 490 years prophecy would be in two parts, really 2 events. The first event would be after 483 years. Know and understand, from the day of the decree to restore and build Jerusalem, the day Daniel was praying for, until Jesus would be presented as Messiah of the Jews, there would be 483 years, exactly, to the day. In retrospect, this actually happened. King Artaxerxes of Persia, my stepson, gave a decree on March 14th of 445 BC, authorizing Nehemiah to join the exiles that had previously returned to rebuild the temple of Yahweh in Jerusalem, with the sole purpose of rebuilding the city itself, the walls and the homes. Indeed, the streets and the walls were built again, just as Gabriel had told Daniel. If we begin with the date of the king's decree and count the exact number of days found in 483 Jewish years, the date is April 6th, AD 32, the 10th of Nisan. This is the exact day Jesus was riding into Jerusalem on a donkey, and the people were waving palm branches, exclaiming, "Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord." The exact date of the presentation of Jesus as Messiah and King was foretold, right there in the Scriptures. No wonder Jesus held the Jewish leadership accountable for not recognizing him. The second event, the final 1 week of years, or 7 years, does not immediately follow the first 493 years. There is a gap between the first 483 years and the final 7 years, known as the tribulation. The exact amount of time of the gap is not given to Daniel. During the time of the gap, Messiah would be cut off, making way for the birth of his church. This is the church age, born at Pentecost. During the gap, or the church age, the people of the prince of Satan will destroy Jerusalem and the sanctuary once more. Wars against Israel will continue until finally Satan's prince will confirm a covenant with Israel for 7 years. However, in the middle of the 7 years, the prince, otherwise known as the Antichrist, will end the sacrifice and offering to Yahweh, breaking the covenant. During the final 3.5 years of the 7, this prince will commit abominations. However, there is hope. At the end, this Antichrist will experience the consummation or end of all things, as determined by God. Daniel's prayer unleashed much of God's favor over Israel. Back in Jerusalem, the newly returned exiles were working at the task of settling back into their homes and land, and collectively building the altar of Yahweh amidst the desolate ruins of Jerusalem. They had lost so much, but they did not despise the day of small beginnings. With Yahweh's help, they overcame opposition and renewed the daily sacrifice, eventually completing the temple under the direction of Joshua and Zerubbabel and the prophets Haggai and Zechariah. It would not be long until Nehemiah would come and direct the rebuilding of the city walls, the gates, and the homes. Meanwhile, back in Persia, Daniel, a man beloved of God, received some of the most detailed and exciting prophecies outlined in the Bible. In our final session, I will share with you more of his visions of the end times.